always bet on black. That's not what Blade says. That's from Passenger 57. You are a fake fan. Fake fan.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor and I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out our introduction video. There's a link to it in the description below. It'll give you a pretty good idea of what the Horror Movie Syllabus is all about, but in short, we look at a particular subgenre of horror, and then we pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore. But this is our Doctorate Level series, where we revisit a past subgenre that we've already covered and look at a 4th new Doctorate Level selection, something maybe a little bit more deeper cut, a little less known, in addition to recapping what we've looked at previously. And today, we're revisiting the Blaxploitation subgenre. Now, if you saw our previous video, you know that we talked about some really great movies, some fun stuff, but we also talked about how the Blaxploitation era, which is typically defined as the 1970s, although my argument was that it continues beyond and even persists to this day. More on that a little bit later. That the subgenre is kind of known for things like having, frankly, low budgets, in addition to the exploitation hallmark of chasing trends and fads and having lurid graphic content, basically being exploitation movies. That's basically what blaxploitation is. It's exploitation movies for a black audience, made by black creators, black filmmakers, black actors. And so the movies have these low budgets and it tends to undercut sometimes the power of the movies, the importance of them, the message that they're sending, and or just the quality of them, the storytelling. Sometimes the stories are really good, but the movies themselves not quite as good. We looked at a few movies that I felt like fell in that category, where they were doing something rather ambitious, but were being held back by a lack of money and by having to kind of work in this exploitation, genre, blaxploitation subgenre. It really kind of held back some of the message and some of the quality of the movies, which is unfortunate. But even with those limitations, these movies managed to shine. And that's the thing, we kind of have to grade these movies on a bit of a curve because of these limitations, because of the time period, because of the restraint that was kind of imposed upon these filmmakers. But it's nice to see these movies endure as classics, or sometimes really cult classics, and they're really definitely worth examining further. And that's what we did in our video, and we're going to recap what we looked at right now. The first blaxploitation horror movie we looked at was Blackula. And Blackula is a perfect example of what I'm talking about when I talk about budget limitations really undercutting the quality of the movie, because we talked a lot about how this is an excellent movie. It's far better, surprisingly better than you think it is from a name like Blackula, which just sounds kind of silly. The movie itself is actually playing it rather straight and giving you really quality acting, a good script, and a really solid message that is, again, undercut because it's blaxploitation, because it's kind of campy, kind of, constrained by budget and stuff like that. So it's hard to take the effects seriously. It's hard for it to feel particularly scary or menacing, but the quality still manages to shine through. And it's what makes the movie so noteworthy, aside from the obviously funny name, the punny name that is, kind of memorable. The name is misleading. The movie is much more quality, much less campy than you're expecting it to be, and it definitely deserves your attention. The next blaxploitation horror movie you looked at was Sugar Hill. And Sugar Hill is yet another example of what we're talking about here. Another movie that's really, really good, has some quality actors in it, has a really cool story, but the budget's not quite there. And it's particularly noteworthy because of the zombie aspect of it, where it's not the most egregious thing to have zombies that don't necessarily look all that great. We see a lot of that now, but it does undercut a little bit of the quality of the movie, because the movie still has themes that resonate, racial overtones that really work in this revenge story that they're telling, that really, frankly, resonate today. They matter today. And I also talked a lot about the use of voodoo zombies as opposed to like virus zombies, which I thought was really cool and ties in really well with the black experience and the black perspective in this movie. So all in all, a really quality movie that is, again, kind of hampered by budget constraints, but doesn't really matter. It still winds up being a very strong message, a very strong performance from the actors, a very well-told story that's very entertaining, and is, something that really stands out even today by today's standards as a quality film. And the last blaxploitation horror movie that we talked about on the syllabus was Tales from the Hood. And Tales from the Hood kind of illustrates what I was talking about when I say that blaxploitation has persisted past the 70s, because I feel like this movie is a good illustration of a movie made by black filmmakers, black artists, for a primarily black audience that was still using the tropes and the themes and the fads of the day, and it works extremely well. This one is actually much more tongue-in-cheek. It's trying to be funny, but it's not doing it at the expense of the message. It's still showing a very a positive black portrayal, while also just kind of poking fun and lampooning things, and it works extremely well. It's a lot of fun. In particular, Clarence Williams III, who I talked about quite a bit in the video because I'm a fan, just chewing scenery in this movie and really kind of steals the show. It's an excellent example of what he can bring to the table and how he can elevate a project. But overall, fun movie. It's managing to say something important without making it feel like a message to you. And it's definitely one that it warranted being on the syllabus for sure. So those were the blaxploitation horror movies that we looked at previously. And now let's get into our doctorate level selection. Our doctorate level selection for the blaxploitation horror subgenre is Abby. Abby came out in 1974 and is a pretty well-known blaxploitation movie, in part because of what it's about, and in part because of what happened because of what it's about. It's a really pretty interesting story and has made the movie probably a little bit more notorious and well-known than it deserves to be, but it does still have some interesting things that are worth talking about, and we're going to get into all of this in just a minute. First, if you haven't seen it before, the movie is about a professor who goes on an archaeological dig and finds an artifact that, when he opens it up, releases an evil spirit who travels across the world to infect his daughter-in-law, his son's wife. And so she becomes possessed with an evil spirit and winds up acting very strange and unusual. And it's a problem that they need to solve. They wind up, confining her to a room and have to try to exorcise the demon from her. And if that sounds familiar, that's part of what we're going to be talking about today. So let's get right into this. The movie is essentially an Exorcist ripoff. There's no other way around it. And it stars William H. Marshall as the professor, in kind of the Father Merrin role, if you will. William H. Marshall being the star of Blackula. So you've got a tagline of, Blackula meets the Exorcist. And I'm down for that. That sounds amazing. That sounds awesome. And the movie isn't awesome, but it is interesting. They do a really cool job of translating the idea or the concept of the Exorcist into more of a black-focused story by, not using the Catholic religion and instead having like Baptist church ministers as your protagonist. And instead of using, Catholic demonology, Christian iconography, they're using a West African religion, Yoruba, which I think actually was Marshall's idea to use that. And the demon that they're talking about is a demon called Eshu, which is somewhat of a real entity, or an entity in real West African folklore. This is my tangential brief review from Wikipedia. Not a terribly great research job there, but the point is they were trying to do The Exorcist but black. And that's great. That's cool. I love that idea. But who didn't love that idea is Warner Brothers, the makers of The Exorcist. They were not okay with this at all. Probably because the movie was a hit. It made money when it was released. And so Warner Brothers swiftly filed a lawsuit, had that movie pulled from theaters, not before it made a few $1 million, which again, 1974 blaxploitation film. This is a lot of money. And so Warner Brothers, they saw those dollars and were like, nope, we're yanking this. And that's what gives this movie its notoriety. It's not just an Exorcist ripoff, but it's one that got the attention of Warner Brothers, and they were able to shut it down. They were able to get the prints pulled, and that is unfortunate because while the movie is a ripoff, there's no way around it. I don't think it would necessarily hurt anything, because I don't think it's a substitute for The Exorcist. The Exorcist is a far superior film. Let me be clear, Abby does not sniff The Exorcist in terms of quality, but it is not a shambles of a movie either. It is a good movie. Again, William H. Marshall, who I already mentioned in Blackula, is a quality actor. He's very, very good, and he's bringing that gravitas here. And then Carol Speed, who is playing Abby, the woman who gets possessed, is doing a really remarkable job because it's kind of a silly thing. She is older than Reagan in The Exorcist. She's not a child, she's a grown woman. And instead of it being just like shocking that she's saying, grotesque things because she's a child, it's more like she's a minister's wife who's suddenly acting very promiscuous and saying very vulgar things. So it still has that same kind of shock factor, not as shocking as a child, but it still resonates and works as a shock factor. And she plays it with gusto. It is a little over the top and as a result a little campy because, again, the budget's not there. It just doesn't have the same quality filmmaking that The Exorcist does because it doesn't have the money to have that. In fact, there's some behind the scenes stories about how the Carol Speed wasn't the first choice of actress for the role, but the other woman who was originally chosen wanted too much money. They didn't have it. So Carol Speed got the job, but she did do a really good job. She even sings a song in the movie called Is Your Soul a Witness, which is noteworthy because it's a really good song. It's a song that I think she wrote for the movie that is, done as like a church song and apparently never was recorded. The only version of this that exists is in the movie itself. And that's a problem too, because the movie is hard to find in a way because there's not a lot of prints left, thanks to Warner Brothers in the lawsuit. There are DVD copies of it out there that are not the easiest things to track down, and the quality is pretty poor. It's from crappy 16 millimeter prints that aren't very good, and there's not much you can do about it because there's not really anything available to remaster or do anything better. There's not going to be a Blu-ray or 4K version of this. Sorry to my friend Tom who loves that stuff. You're not going to get your high resolution, high definition version of this. It's just not going to happen because it's not there. All you've got is this really low res print that is honestly hard to watch. The movie's not the easiest movie to track down, and if you find it, it's not going to be the cleanest copy. It's a little hard to watch. It's a little hard to sit through, and that's unfortunate. Again, it's that budget issue coupled with the Warner Brothers lawsuit thing really hampering this movie from being everything that it could be. And it's a bummer because the movie is cool. It's good. I love The Exorcist, so if you're going to knock it off, I'm kind of already halfway there with you. And then the take they took on it with the West African background and that religion, really cool. Felt like a fresh idea to me. That was a good idea by William H. Marshall, and I wish I would have been able to see some of the other script revision ideas he had. Apparently, he got kind of upset with the production when he saw because a lot of the things that he wanted to try to get in there didn't get in there, and based on what got in there that he had suggested, I would have liked to have seen what else he could have brought to that movie. Because he is a great actor and he is a smart man who's bringing some really cool ideas to this. I wish they would have done more. Abby is, to me, mostly interesting for its potential. As a straight ripoff, it had a lot of potential. And even what's on the screen is entertaining. It's fun. The scenes with Abby acting out are fantastic. William H. Marshall doing his Father Merrin is great. So it could have been amazing, but it's still interesting as it is. And of course, the background is what makes it so notorious. Made it what we had to talk about today. This is why it makes the syllabus, is because of its notoriety for that reason. But if you haven't seen Abby, it's worth a watch for sure. It's really, again, more for the history that it's notorious, but it's entertaining enough that it's worth watching, especially if you are a fan of The Exorcist. You'll get a kick out of this one, I think, for sure. And if you've seen it, of course, let me know what you think of it in the comments down below. So that's our doctorate level selection for the Blaxploitation Horror subgenre. But of course, I've got an extra credit selection as well because I've got some good movies to talk about. And I had to whittle it down to one, and this is the one I picked. The extra credit movie that we're talking about today is The Blackening. The Blackening came out in 2023, so it's a rather recent movie, and I did see it recently and absolutely loved it. So I was like, oh, we're going to definitely talk about this on the channel for sure. And it's interesting because I went back and forth on whether or not this is actually blaxploitation or is this more just black horror, which we're going to be talking about really, really soon on the channel. And I went ahead and opted for blaxploitation because I really did feel like the 70s movies, like the more modern blaxploitation movies, it really is kind of chasing on tropes and trends and trying to, lean into some of these trends, basically, black fueled humor, satire, spoofs, turning the horror genre on its head and doing it really, really well. Now, if you haven't seen it yet, the movie is about a group of friends who go and rent a cabin out in the woods for Juneteenth to celebrate, have a good time, and they find a very mysterious racist game with like a Sambo type character on there, asking them black-themed questions to test their blackness. And it all leads to them being terrorized by a masked killer who is clearly motivated by racial motivations, and is, really kind of testing what it means to be black. And it leads to a lot of hilarious moments, some scares that are not that scary, frankly, and frankly, a lot of hijinks of the fun kind. The movie is a breath of fresh air in terms of just giving what is essentially a slasher movie, a kind of a fresh take, a little bit of energy by having an all black cast. The tagline of the movie on the poster was, "We can't all die first," which is already highlighting the whole trope of the black person dies first in the movie. And so that's already having fun with one of my favorite subgenres, the slasher subgenre. So I was already primed for this. And what I like about this movie, I like a lot of things about this movie, but one of the things I like about it is that it is black focused comedy. It is jokes by black artists, black filmmakers, and actors for a black audience. And they're not going to bother explaining it to everybody else. So, some of us aren't necessarily going to get all the jokes because they ain't for us. They're not necessarily going to spell it out and explain it to us, but there's still enough there that's universally accessible that it works. It's still very, very funny, and you can go along for the ride even if this is not really aimed directly at you. A big part of this is because the acting is great almost across the board. There's only one person in the movie that I didn't particularly care for, but the rest of them are all very funny. And yeah, they're playing kind of caricatures, but caricatures with just a hint of depth to them too, which keeps it interesting, makes you connect with the characters. And there's a lot of recognizable black actors here, like Grace Byers, Dwayne Perkins, that you'll recognize them from other projects. So it's got a bit of a pedigree to it. And I have to admit, the movie is not very scary. It really is leaning towards funny. And that actually is a good idea because, again, you've got a game cast who is really playing off each other very well. The jokes are landing. The comedy is good. The physical comedy is good. Apparently they did ad-lib a lot of the dialogue, and you can kind of feel the energy in the movie. These people are playing off each other very, very well, and it works to gangbusters. It is really funny, really entertaining. I've seen it a couple times now, and it stays funny to me every time I've seen it. I will admit though that the twist to the movie is a bit meh. It's a bit predictable. I kind of saw it coming, and it's unfortunate because it'd be nice if the horror aspect of it and the mystery aspect to it were a little bit stronger to match the comedy aspect to it, which I think works extremely well. But it's a minor nitpick because the comedy is carrying it through. It almost, if it was putting this into horror comedy, it would be a little off. The mix would be off. It would be too much comedy, not enough horror. But as a blaxploitation movie, it's working for me extremely well. It's really leaning into the satire, playing off of those horror tropes, those racial horror tropes that are pretty prevalent, and shining a light on them in a way that is fun, but also carries a bit of an edge to it, a bit of a message. And I appreciate that. I like that. This movie is a lot of fun. I would recommend it to, well, frankly, anybody. I know some people probably aren't going to be into it, and that's fine. But it really is a good movie that, again, aimed for a black audience, but really anybody could enjoy it. So if you haven't seen it, check it out and then let me know what you think. So that's our update for the blaxploitation horror subgenre. Like I said, there's a lot of gems to be found. There's some stuff that's not great in the subgenre, but there's a lot of cool stuff that is fun. Some of it's nostalgic fun. Some of it's just campy fun. And some of it's genuinely good, and you might have to sift through a little bit to find the good stuff, but it's worth it. It really, really is. And hopefully I've shined a light on some of the ones that you should be checking out if you haven't already. And now it's time to look at a horror trivia pursuit card. As you know, I like to read a question here live on camera and try to answer it. And let's go with the supernatural category on the card because, Abby is a supernatural movie. So here's our question. In 2010's Insidious, Dalton Lambert inherited his ability to astral project from which of his parents? This one's easy. This one's particularly easy if you've seen the most recent Insidious movie, which I have. I do enjoy those movies. We've talked about the Insidious series on the channel already, and I like it. I know there's mixed opinions on this, but overall, I think the franchise is pretty popular. I think even this most recent one did really well. I was okay. I was a little on the fence about the most recent Insidious movie. I felt like it struggled from having Patrick Wilson being a director and kind of putting a lot more focus on him. He was integrating himself into the movie a lot more. than maybe necessarily it should have been. And I feel like the kid should have been the main character a little bit more. The focus should have been on him a little bit more. But that's just my personal opinion. And if you got a different one, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Obviously, I'm prattling on a little bit to give you guys some time to think about this, but I think this is a pretty easy question if you've seen the movies, especially if you've seen the most recent one. But if you've seen any of them, I know I'm going to go ahead and answer. So lock your answer to the question in. So the answer is Patrick Wilson. Patrick Wilson is the person he inherits his power from. His dad, his father is the one, not his mother. His father is one. And the fourth movie, or the fifth movie, I think it's the fifth movie, actually really focuses on that aspect of it quite a bit. So I think this question was probably written before that movie came out because it makes this answer much easier. But let's go ahead and double check the card. His father, Josh Lambert, as portrayed by Patrick Wilson. So it actually says Patrick Wilson on the card is the answer, which is awesome. So got that one right. Not that hard. Again, that's a fairly fundamental aspect of the movie. But did you get it right? And if not, I guess you didn't say father. You probably said mother. But if you said something other than that, let us know in the comments below so we can mock you, because that's weird. But hopefully you enjoyed the video today, and hopefully you'll check out some of these movies if you haven't seen them, because they are worth your time. They are worth checking out. And next week we'll do something completely different. But until then, class dismissed.
You a vampire? Look at the time. I should be going. Be seeing you, yes. Hey, wait a minute. Works every time.